Hi, everybody. Today is Wednesday, August 21st, and I am Aaron of Sigbeard, and you are at the K8s Infra working group every other weekly meeting. You are all going to be adhering to the Kubernetes code of conduct by basically being your very best selves, and you can watch yourselves do this on YouTube later because this is a publicly recorded meeting. So I know we have a number of things on open discussion, and Brandon apparently has a scheduling conflict. So if you're ready to do your demo, Brandon, we can jump straight to that and then go back to our recurring topics.
Yeah, I think I'm ready. Just give me a sec here. Right. Can people see my screen?
Yes, a lovely terminal.
Great, thanks. Actually, one second. I got something I need to handle. Okay. So let me give some context. I have been building this tool called rgit, which uses a technology called certificate transparency. And the big idea is that when software gets released, you need some way of ensuring that that released software never gets tampered with. And this has kind of been an ongoing issue in the software community. I don't know if you saw again yesterday, there was a hack against a library in the Ruby ecosystem and the Ruby gems repository, where somebody modified an old release and nobody noticed. And so I've been thinking about this problem quite a bit and how we might solve it. And it turned out that some other folks have been thinking about this as well, particularly team at Mozilla. And so I essentially implemented this thing that the team at Mozilla had written a design doc on, but never really implemented it in the product. So the end result is that I built this tool called rgit, which is similar to wget in that it downloads stuff off of, say, GitHub or whatever. And the trick that it does, the thing that's interesting about it, is that it also downloads a SHA-256 sums file from the GitHub or wherever the thing has been uploaded to. And then it validates that SUM256 file and the contents of that against a specially crafted domain name. And this specially crafted domain name ends up in the certificate transparency logs, which is an append-only log that is ran by a number of different organizations. And any certificate that's issued by any CA that's trusted by the major browsers, web browsers, by policy has to end up in this log. And then I validate that domain certificate has actually ended up in a log. And if that validation passes, then we check the sum of the actual binary that we downloaded off GitHub matches something that is in that SHA-256 sums that's in the log, and then the validation passes. So the big advantage of this is that essentially you can use various tools or get an RSS feed of any changes against star GitHub Kubernetes. And if somebody reports that rgit's not downloading or downloading because of an error, we know that somebody tampered with the file and didn't update the SHA-256 sums. If somebody is watching the RSS feed and sees that, release 1.10 of Kubernetes got updated yesterday, that's a little weird because, we haven't had a release of Kubernetes 1.10 in a while. And so we can go and investigate and find out if somebody's GitHub credentials were compromised. Otherwise, we really don't have a good way of doing that, and certainly not a way that has a cryptographic foundation behind it. So that's the tool. The requirements for Kubernetes to start using the tool is essentially to just publish a SHA-256 sums file alongside the binaries that go up on GitHub. And that's it. The UX workflow after that is that you run a command called submit, and that just adds the SHA-256 sums to the database that the service behind rget that issues the certificates. So it's aware of that, and then it'll start to issue certificates the next time somebody runs the actual rget command. So yeah, the project is an alpha, but it works today. Like I have etcd, a couple of etcd releases in the tool, and it's super low friction for projects to try it out because you just publish a SHA-256 sum file, which can be like generated by core utils or whatever. So yeah, that's the tool. I have. I guess let me show you on GitHub where it's at, or I'll just put it in the notes. Actually, it's up on GitHub. I also wrote a blog post, essentially explaining in plain English, similar to what I've done here, why the tool exists. And in my opinion, I kind of see this as an alternative to code signing for most projects, particularly community developed projects, because key custody is just such an impossible thing for a community project to do correctly. You end up with lots of people having custody or running some server somewhere with an HSM, and then who gets SSH access to that, and then is there an audit log, and who runs the audit log? It's just key custody is really hard. Yeah, so that's the tool. Happy to take any questions.
So I apologize if you mentioned this and I missed it. The URIs for releases of large open source projects like etcd or like Kubernetes are pretty guessable. How do we know that the sums that are there for a given URI have been put there by an authorized person?
Yeah, so it bootstraps off of the authentication and authorization of GitHub. So as long as essentially what we're doing is we're asserting that the correct people have access to GitHub and they can upload SHA-256 sums, and then we're appending that SHA-256 sums its sum to append only log. And if somebody updates the SHA-256 sums, say that your GitHub gets hacked and somebody updates that SHA-256 sums, there's one of two cases. Either they don't submit that update to rget, and then everyone's rget fails because they try to download something and it doesn't validate because that thing's not in the log, or it gets updated to the log, and we've hooked up the certificate transparency database's RSS feed to say an email that goes to Kubernetes 6 releases. And in that case, like we notice, well, that's kind of weird. Like we didn't do a release today. And not only that, it's a release that we made 2 weeks ago. Why is something getting modified? So those are the two cases.
So does that mean that there's a like worldwide canonical sums file, or can there be mirrors of that?
So this is all based on URLs. So it downloads from, there's like some URL guessing magic in the tool right now where it guesses where the SHA-256 sums is based on essentially where GitHub presents URLs for download.
So I have a PR up to actually add SHA-256 sums and 512 sums that I linked in the doc as kind of like first phase of this. One of the questions that I had as a result of that was, so like we don't publish our tarballs to GitHub, right?
Yeah.
So we can publish, so we can publish the sums, but is it possible for rget to reference a different URI to pull the tarballs from?
So I haven't done that yet. So right now, the tool essentially has hard-coded domains that it knows how to guess at. But I'm happy to add that support. It's not
Yeah,
really it's just
yeah,
right now I just scope the project to be super simple just to try to get the concept done. So yeah, it's something I've been thinking about. And then yeah, the tool also over time, I may get rid of the requirement to publish SHA-256 sums and just make this a straight URL based tool. And luckily, the Go community has actually built a bunch of tooling to make that super easy as well. And so I may just get rid of that requirement altogether. The only reason I have that requirement in the tool right now is like I can very deterministically tell if somebody's trying to DDoS the service because like these SHA-256 sums should be like plain text. They have a certain format, and I won't download more than like a kilobyte of SHA-256 sums, you know, because the files shouldn't be that big. So,
yeah. So one of the things we're trying to do with releases and artifacts in general is move towards mirroring, so that we'd be able to have the mirrors at various cloud providers, at various geographies, et cetera. How does this play with that?
So essentially, the way that we do that is we just have to write a little bit of tooling to ensure that. So it's easier to show than tell. Gosh, Zoom. Oh my gosh.
By the way, thank you for tackling this problem.
Oh yeah, no problem. Yeah, so let me just run rgit on etcd again. So do highlights show up? Do you see me highlighting stuff?
Yes.
Yeah. So that little thingy there is the Merkle root of the SHA-256 sums file. And so essentially what we have to do is write a little bit of tooling that ensures that everyone has the same Merkle root for the same release, you know? So like make sure that, you know, Google and Amazon and Microsoft are all presenting the same Merkle root for their given mirroring URL.
Okay. You use words that I don't understand, but I will let that fly.
I mean, do you want me to simplify it?
No. I think I get it what you're saying, but I'm crypto dumb, so don't even try.
Sure.
What about, you said something about a service that there's running a service is running?
Yeah. So because I'm using essentially I'm hacking this on top of the certificate transparency logs. I have a service, which this is the domain, is merkelcounty.com. And that's just because I'm issuing Let's Encrypt certs in order to get to in order to pin to the log. And so essentially you're trusting this service to be a reliable recorder. But I mean, there's no incentive for this service to lie to you either, because then the download fails again. So
my concern is more who's running this service, and can we actually, understanding that it's alpha, can we rely on this?
Well, most of the actual hard work is happening from the certificate transparency logs, which are already ran by like Cloudflare and Google and DigiCert. So this service is kind of dumb and doesn't do much except beyond issue a cert. So yeah, it can be relied on.
But I mean, who's running it? Who's responsible for it if it crashes, when it crashes?
Yeah, so I'm currently the only person running the service.
Okay. Is that something that we would want to run for Kubernetes on Kubernetes infrastructure, or is that something that we need a consortium across companies to run?
Yeah, so what I think that after talking to the Go team, and they're trying to run a similar service, really what you want is you really want one service that's doing the reporting, and then lots of auditors over the recording. And so, yeah, ideally, there's only one of these services in existence doing all the recording, just because it does nobody really, it doesn't add any additional security, and it complicates people who want to actually audit the log. So, because now they have multiple sources and to audit from.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any thought? Sorry if I have questions. Somebody else jump in. Any thought to how this would apply to container images and container registries?
Yeah, so there's a couple of GitHub issues that I filed. Essentially, there's two approaches. If I continue down the path of the SHA-256 sums thing, you just put the Docker image SHA-256 sum in the file, and then we would need to write either like an admission controller or like an auditing tool that would run on cluster that essentially did a similar validation to just downloading stuff off the internet. And so that's pretty straightforward. And then if I go the Go route of just adding arbitrary URLs, then it's even simpler because we don't have to publish the SHA-256 sums at all. So, yeah.
So the reason I feel like I've had people tell me about this tool in the past is in the context of discussions around Debian and RPM packages for Kubernetes, which currently are published to Google's repos signed using Google's key. And I feel like this has been put forward as possibly something that could get us out of that situation as an alternative to having a bunch of people get together and have a key signing party so that we have a community-owned key used to sign packages the way that Apache and OpenStack do things. I'm curious if you agree this is something that could be used for that, and if you could sort of sketch what that looks like. You're muted at the moment, sorry.
That's a kind of complicated problem. The thing that I've been thinking about is essentially having like an automated signing service that only signs stuff that's in the log. Because essentially, like, Debian just has this really weird trust model, and it's not great. But we need to work with it inside of it. I think my ideal end state would be creating a tool that goes and reads the audit log, and if it sees something in the audit log, it just signs it. And then it's kind of automated and closed off, and nobody really, like, it's just a standalone computer just blindly signing stuff that ends up in the log. There's just all sorts of problems with public key cryptography for these sorts of software releases and community projects. I just don't know how to solve it. The way we solved it at CoreOS is like we had an HSM, and only certain people had SSH access to that HSM, and it's just, yeah, the overhead of doing it right is just so much. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
My concern with the automated key signing of the audit log is, like you said, it sounded like this is predicated upon having a bunch of people actually monitor the audit log, and we might want some way to ensure that like humans have the ability to catch this before the machines act upon it.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of tricky, right? Like the problem with key custody is somebody steals the key, and then you have actually no idea whether the key was stolen and who's signing what. Like nothing's ever in an audit log. At least if you invert it, like it goes audit log and then signing, you know deterministically what what was signed, right? Yeah, it's really tricky. Yeah, problem.
So what are next steps?
So if Kubernetes wants to like try this out for for releases, it would be publishing SHA-256 sums, and then I guess I would go back and patch the tool to be able to accept non-GitHub URLs. Or the project could wait until I get further along with the just arbitrary URL path that the Go team is taking and start to run a log that supports that. So those would be the two potential next steps.
So the POC for that is already up and I've tested it. I'll file an issue to support the non-GitHub URLs.
Yeah, there's already an issue there. I mean, the OpenStack project wanted to try it out as well. It has a similar, like, we want to mirror stuff and blah, blah, blah.
I just wanted to say, I think this is cool. I think you made a fairly clear problem statement previously, which is interesting, which is you said that the problem with like GPG style signing is that there's no audit log and that this gives a audit log. What if we didn't, like, what if we bridge the two worlds, right? What if we had GPG signing that was sort of handled by something which put it into an audit log? Then we wouldn't have to bridge, like we wouldn't have to reinvent too much.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of what certificate transparency is about, is like, they do the inverse, which is you trust the certificate authorities, which are just, public key signings at the end of the day. And then their signature isn't trusted until it ends up in the audit log. And so, but that's just an adapter to how their business model works. I mean, you can do it the other way too, which is only sign stuff that you found in the audit log. Don't just sign arbitrary stuff sent to you over SSH or whatever. It doesn't really matter. The end result is the same. Yeah.
Well, we could just have a GPG signer that puts it into the audit log, signs it for a future validity, puts it into the audit log, and then we don't have to bridge anything.
Sure. Yeah. I just don't know. Like today, I think the key custody is just Google holds the key. So,
well, we can have a key that was encrypted that you could decrypt with a key that you provide.
Yeah.
Like or secret sharing type strategies.
Yeah. But then you have to like have a trusted computer that does that because holds on to it.
Yeah, it's, as you say, it's similar to the like TLS signing problem.
I mean, if the community wants to go down that route, the source code for how CoreOS has been doing that is up. I'll link that into chat. But it's similar, like you log into a machine that doesn't actually have the key, and then you have to get some threshold of signatures to say we're going to sign it, and then that computer like goes off and actually signs it. But it's like a root goal.
Did it put it into a log or not?
It doesn't, because like, apt doesn't actually check the log, so.
Right. I think that was maybe where my question was aimed. Is I've heard from cluster lifecycle folks that working with RPM and working with apt is table stakes for their world. And so to me, as awesome as this tool is, it's unclear to me how that interoperates with that world and solves the problem of key custody that we have today for those artifacts.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I'll write up an issue on this whole, like, how do we bridge GPG signing world, like creating a like robot tool that signs based on things found in the audit log. I think that's a reasonable idea. Yeah. Good feedback.
Anybody else? Cool. Thank you so much for your time, Brandon. Really appreciate the demo.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, everyone.
Cool. All right. I think I want to take us back to our recurring topics real quick, if we can. Tim and Justin, real quickly, would you two like to have a battle of the billing reports?
What date range are we working on, Justin?
I will bring it up. Sorry, I have not teed it up. I will tee it up now. Everyone should have received it in their inbox. I actually had a look at it. There is an interesting factoid in there, which I think you can see, but I don't know if anyone noticed it. No, okay. Am I the only one that looks at these billing reports?
Furiously searching my inbox to find the billing report.
I have it here. I can share it if that's handy, because I know, Tim, you don't want to, I presume you don't want to share it. Let's see. So I think we're sharing it, right?
Yeah.
So the date range is July 22nd to August 18th.
July 22nd to August 18th.
So give people a preview of how Tim's doing that.
That little blip in cloud storage, our factoid.
That is very good. Well spotted. And now we can actually see where it's coming from. Somewhere. Yes.
All right, give me a number.
Cool. That's a lot of percents.
Yes. It's only $2 though. 338.39, Tim.
I got 313.89.
Here we go again. Okay, well, we'll sync afterwards, I guess.
Yep.
Okay.
Just remind me, is this a battle of credited versus uncredited?
No, I think I figured out how to represent that in the main dashboard. But they keep changing stuff, so.
Okay.
I think Brandon says that I owe you $25 now. Tim.
I'm okay with it.
I think we're okay at this level of spend, but maybe not in a couple of months. In a couple of months, it's going to get really expensive.
Yeah, I mean, that's almost 10% off, so.
So, okay, can you maybe explain to us that blip for a little bit? It looks an awful lot like you turned something on, there were many downloads, and then you turned it off. Or was this like a one-time transfer thing?
Wait, are you talking about the delta, or are you talking about, we don't know the purpose of the delta, or the cause of the delta yet, but we can see a new item here, which is, yes, that there is an increase in spend, and that's because I started staging the COPS binary artifacts.
Okay, so the staging transfer. Got it.
There's also actually some prod ones, because I actually promoted some of them to prod as well, temporarily, to like test the promoter there.
Okay.
Looks like someone else. Oh.
Sorry, what is that percent? Is that million, billion, trillion, quadrillion?
It's big, but it's only $3.
9 quadrillion % improvement?
Well, there's 3 dots, so who knows? But Kate's release test prod was bigger, I think, although honestly, who knows?
Okay.
All right. So I don't know that I'm really going to have time to walk us through the entire board today for those folks who are interested in the board and what's on it. I'm pasting a link into chat, but I think this kind of answers my questions related to billing, which is it looks like, yes, we can break down storage by bucket. We can't break it down by path inside of the bucket.
Yeah, that's right.
We need to feel like there's about $25 worth of difference. Maybe as the numbers get larger, it'll become clear to us whether this is a relative or absolute difference and how concerned we should be about that. And I'm assuming we still don't have any information on per namespace billing for the cluster infra since it doesn't seem like we've made much progress on cluster infra. Have I left anything out related to billing?
The one thing I would say is I propose the way we attack the breakdowns is when the numbers get big, then we break it down. So I'd say like when it's $2 or $3, we don't need to worry about the storage costs per path. But when it becomes, say, $100 on transfer, we probably do want to know the transfer costs per path. Like, but I feel like it's probably a waste of everyone's time to do it for a $5, to do a breakdown at a $5 level.
We probably won't get the accuracy that we want anyway, or the visibility that we want anyway at those small scale.
I agree with that. I think it was more to underscore that our approach seems to be like handing out buckets rather than trying to get everybody to jump into one large bucket. Since it's easier for us to break things down that way.
That is the case today, but before we commit to that as a path, because that has management overhead too, I would like to I think we should proceed with the single bucket that we're talking about now, or the single primary bucket, and see what we can do. Before we commit to having 100, what we call the prod storage repos, right?
Okay.
Justin seems like he's disagreeing.
No, I'm agreeing. I'm just getting a little confused. We only have one prod bucket today, if that's what we're saying.
Yes, but the point, I think, Aaron, stop me if I'm misinterpreting. The point was, if we can't break down the cost beyond one bucket, then we probably don't want one bucket. We probably want N buckets.
Yes, I'm thinking of it purely from the model of, does each sub-project get their own bucket, or do we put everybody into one gigantic prod bucket?
Yep. We haven't tried yet. So before we commit to that, I think we need to do some more exploration. And frankly, like, it's just not been high enough on the priority list.
I would say, like, I'm relatively confident we can write a billing report that can break it down by path for storage. I was saying, let's wait until the numbers are big enough that we care. Like, because
I think the main point is confidence that we can.
We can, because we just list all the files and add up the sizes for storage.
Well, that won't show us transfer costs.
Correct. Transfer is separate.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So other item from the board I would generally walk at this point would be cluster management, where I think we agreed 2 weeks ago we're going to do Terraform.
Yes, and I sent a note out to the mailing list yesterday because I felt really guilty as I got to the end of yesterday's workday. And I didn't get to review the Terraform PR yet, but Kubernetes code freeze has eaten me alive as usual, probably as I should have predicted. So I didn't get to it this week.
I realized that I replied to that email instead of reply at all. Last night I went and basically cleaned it up so that it goes from a work in progress to like something that would actually be able to be committed and run. We can either like merge and iterate, or we could, like, if you want to sit down sometime this week and like actually put time in the calendar, Tim, and just like, hey, let's put 20 minutes in the calendar and just walk through it so that you have the same confidence that I do on like what's in there. We could also do that.
Yeah, that might be useful, but code freeze is the end of this week, so it probably won't be this week, but it could be next week.
End of next.
That's end of next?
August 29th.
August what?
August 29th.
29th. So it's a week from, okay. All right, so I've still got a little bit of time. Sorry, for some reason I've been operating as if code freeze is the end of this week. Ha!
Well, you've been reviewing massive PRs that would cause huge conflicts if they merge. So I think you prioritized appropriately. But I agree. I think our discussion last time was about like, what does it take to get to merge and iterate status? You expressed that you had some concerns.
It's just such a big step forward to turn this thing on that I'd like to make sure I understand. Like, I just don't know Terraform at all, really. And I want to understand the operating model. So, Christoph, I might very well take you up on that offer, and you can shoulder surf and explain to me what's going on, and you can actually watch me try it, and we can validate together.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool.
The other thing that I was going to ask for is, I don't know where the right place to put it is, but I don't have permissions to whatever prod project we're going to put this in. So I'm going to dig up that, and if nobody has any objections, I'm going to like PR myself into wherever I need to do to get permissions for the prod project.
That's probably fine. You could also, there's a test project that Arnaud was using to spin up clusters that you could also get yourself added to by being in a group. I forget which group.
I already have access to that one.
Okay.
And that one I think is just like people direct adding, because we were just going to blow away the entire project. So like,
yes,
Arnaud has owner and he just added me directly to it. So I've tested in that project, and that's where the current PR is pointing to.
Got it.
Is that particular project. But I want to set it up for like whatever prod project we have, point it to that one so that we can like appropriately, when we hit merge on the PR, we can just run it and it sets up the cluster in the prod project.
Yep. Just caveat, if you join that group, then you're going to be expected to carry some water.
So for what it's worth, this to me sounds like one of those gates we could use to get us into a merge and iterate state faster, where I feel like Tim's concern is once this merges, it's going to be pointed at prod. Oh no, where we could merge it, where it's pointed at something that's not prod with notes in the README that indicate that this is not yet turned on. This isn't the entire thing. But because it has landed, it gives people a chance to like poke at it, experiment with it, make sure it works, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with that. I assumed that merge and iterate meant like let's get it in, launch it, and use it, and then we'll come back and figure out if it worked right.
I wasn't. Yeah.
So what it's pointing at right now is a dev project that we're going to blow away. And the other kind of design decision that I've made as far as Terraform is concerned is the bigger of your Terraform config, then the bigger your potential fallout is if something breaks. So like you can have one massive Terraform config that does all of our clusters in all of our projects, but that is my opinion is bad. So what I've set up right now is the folder structure is in k8s.io. There's a folder called clusters, and then underneath clusters there is a folder for each project that we're going to set up a cluster in. So then that folder contains the Terraform configs just for that project. And if we need to, like, if we want to at a later date, like dry out and share configuration between multiple things, we can. But this basically gives us like, hey, if that project goes away, we can just hit apply again and the cluster is back up.
Okay, so if we want to get it merged, pointing at the experimental project, I have no objections at all to that. I still will go through it and try to comprehend it and make sure that I know what the heck it's doing. But I remove my objections to merging if we weren't talking about actually doing it for reals.
Okay, so we could literally merge it today then, because it's currently the PR is still pointing at the dev project because I don't have access to the prod project to confirm that it works there.
All right. So, you know what? I have it literally open on my screen. I will look at it from that regard. I will only look at it from a like directory structures, like you just described, point of view, and then I'll approve it.
Thank you, everybody, for moving forward. I still think the idea of walking through would be a great one, possibly even recording, because I'm sure there are a number of people who might be interested in this. So I can chat with you about how to do that offline. And then I feel like do we officially turn it on decision we could have within the next 2 weeks would be like the PR that would be gated that would be, switching it to the prod project. Does anybody want to talk about anything else related to cluster management? One tangential thing, I think, as sort of down in the open discussion section, Linus had put something about creating a proud cluster to run trusted jobs. That's one of the reasons I'm kind of trying to push to get this code merged, is I feel like the use of this Terraform code as a way of standing up said cluster might be our path forward there. Leave feedback on the Terraform PR itself or open issues for later. So I'm generally a fan of like leaving feedback there is cool, but if it's something that needs to be followed up on, issues that are linked to your feedback on that PR are the best.
Yeah, sounds good. I just wanted to say it like the folder structure, like I would add the region in it. Having run Terraform for 3 years before this job, like region is usually one of those things that can break everything if you change it. So having it as a static and in a folder usually helps. But I can open as leave it a comment there or just like feedback for later, whatever you folks prefer.
Yeah, if you have a specific suggestion for the code, like leave a comment on the existing PR, and we might merge today, and then open up a new PR to iterate. But if you have a comment, leave it on the current PR, because then we know where to go looking for like improvements once it gets merged.
Perfect, sounds good. Thank you.
So to close the loop on the proud cluster thing, I'm inclined to suggest that we as a group are blocked until we can get comfortable with Terraform as our primary mechanism of standing up clusters. the counter argument to that would be like, we shouldn't be blocked. We should allow people to just stand up a cluster however they want with like G Cloud container clusters to get moving. I feel like that is the path to entropy, but I'm open to suggestions or disagreements on that.
So what I would suggest, so we've been blocked on this, like, how do we stand up clusters thing for a very long time. I really hope that we are in the home stretch of this, and that we are like, that by 2 weeks from now, if we can have, this is basically last call if you have concerns. Please, if you have concerns or suggestions and want to get involved, please do. Because I would hope by the end of 2 weeks, when we meet next in 2 weeks, I would hope that we are completely unblocked on how to do this. And if we want to stand up a new cluster for Prow or whatever, then we should be able to do that in 2 weeks, like within an hour. What would be helpful as far as actually doing that, and the thing that can be done alongside in the next 2 weeks, is defining the shape of the cluster. So if we have a specific need for a specific cluster, what does that cluster look like? How many node pools? How big are the node pools? What kind of machine types? The key things that we need to decide as far as what the cluster is shaped like. That is something that we can definitely collect in the next 2 weeks. And then when we have, like, okay, this configuration for Terraform we are comfortable with and we are going to move forward with, then we just plunk in the data points that we need, hit Terraform apply, and it stands up a new cluster. Am I being too ambitious, Aaron?
Just saying, I've heard this every 2 weeks for the past couple of months, but I hear you. I think the ask comes from, I think Eric Feda is getting particularly cranky that we're leaning on prow.k8s.io as the trusted cluster, and would really like to see a trusted cluster for trusted jobs like the container image promoter to live in this project managed by this group of people. And I hear and appreciate that. I just feel like we're still not quite ready to take that on. And if we're in the same situation in 2 weeks, I will invite Eric or whomever has these concerns to come to this group and help kind of work through a compromise.
Just for my own edification, are we talking about the control plane elements for Prow, or are we talking about actually like a cluster to run the jobs?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
It may be one or both. Linus, do you have any idea?
No. I mean, that's a great question. I think we would need Eric's input because he's the one concerned about moving out the trusted or the container jobs, promoter jobs from the trusted cluster today. So,
right.
But I don't know what that entails exactly.
I could take a guess at what he is concerned about, but I don't want to necessarily move forward with that being just a guess. Because my guess is the current system is the trusted jobs are probably running on the same cluster as the control plane for Prow. So I'm guessing he wants like a separate trusted cluster that can run the actual jobs that is different from the control plane cluster.
Which is, we're getting further into this discussion than I even intended us to at this point. So anything else related to cluster infrastructure? Okay. So at this point, I would then walk on through things like IAM or storage or whatnot, but unless anybody has anything pressing there, like Justin, do you want to talk about artifact promotion independent of image promotion at all? I know you had sort of an in-flight PR for that last time.
We have an in-flight PR. I think there's a good discussion going on where I put a PR up about like a disaster recovery thing, and Tim was like, you can just use GSU2rsync, you dummy. And I was like, damn it, Tim's right. And but there's some good discussion there about like whether we have a bucket retention policy and whether we lock it. So I would just refer people to that.
Okay. So I just sort of rushed us through the rest of the board. We can come back to it. if anybody has anything pressing, because I wanted to give Jason time to chat to his open discussion item. Jason?
Yes, the Cluster API project has been definitely making use of the image promoter process, and the work that y'all have done to enable that has helped us out greatly. Thank you very much for that. What I wanted to see about was the next step that we want to do, which is automating image builds to our staging bucket. I know we had an outstanding issue where we've talked through the potential ways that we could do this, but I wanted to see if we can start formalizing a process for how do you set this up. I know we need to have a set of service credentials with access to the bucket that can be configured as a PROW secret. And ideally, those credentials would not be the same credentials that I use to manually upload to the bucket. So we need a way to request those. We would need a way to kind of formalize how we request that PROW secret, and then just figuring out the bits of configuration that we need so that we can consume that secret from a PROW job to actually publish on post submit.
Sorry, who's actually running the build in that case?
So in this case, the build would be running from PROW itself. We would want to configure it as a post-submit job so that, say, a PR gets merged to master, we update the latest kind of, we can update the latest tag in the staging bucket so that other developers can, consume those.
Hi. So I was looking for precedents here, and the one that I found was the C advisor. Currently, we do push images to Docker Hub. There is a Docker user and Docker password that is in PRO, as a secret, and then that gets pulled by Python and shell script, and then it gets pushed. It gets built and pushed into. So all the pieces are there for Docker Hub right now. But then, do we want to start with that, or do we want to do something with what we have in container images? That's the question I had for.
So I have a suspicion this is where the previous ask is coming from, to move the container image promoter jobs into their own cluster, because the story for secret management for PROW today is virtual sneaker net. It's not great. And what Jason is proposing very rightly is about like adding more secrets and getting a little more strict about it. But I don't think that the team of people who supports all of the thousands of jobs that run on Kubernetes wants to continue to take on an increased burden of like, hey, can you add this secret? Hey, can you add this secret? And would rather that this group kind of take on coming up with a solution for that. So in addition to just like using Terraform to stand up a cluster, like how can we make sure that we have all the right secrets in all the right namespaces just in hand?
And I wanted to make one clarification too, in that we only want to automate the staging builds, and we don't want to actually automate the image promotion process.
The other thing that I can think of that's kind of sticky as far as, in particular, so building a container in the same cluster as you have secrets. Like that's a very like that's a very interesting way to like expose those secrets, because you still need, like, unless you were doing some other specific thing, like the normal way to build would be like exposing the Docker socket. And then building, like using a privileged container to build your image, unless you're using like one of the magic non-privileged container building solutions that all have caveats. So, and then if you have a privileged container, you have access to any other secrets that are on that particular node. So like in particular, isolating where you're building your images and having like just the secrets that you absolutely need on that cluster, I can see being very important. That's a sticking point.
All right, I will hand off to Justin and put myself in the queue behind DIMS after that.
Thank you. I just wanted the GKE recently started supporting managed pod identity, and it is pretty nice in that if a Proud job can run with a Kubernetes service account, we can now sort of transparently and easily, well, with Terraform, transparently and easily bind that to a Google GCP service account. So that could be, and it manages the secrets for you, other than like creating a Kubernetes service account, which I can't imagine they would object to. So that solves, and the certificates rotate, so the validity of a leak is shorter.
Okay. So the other thing that I wanted to point out was it's not just the secret, it's actually the scripts for building these images are going to be different based on the different projects. Like, for example, the test images that are there in KK, we have a different set of, we have different parameters, different scripts to actually build those. I'm sure the cluster API has its own makefile target or whatever, and how to configure the name of the registry, the user ID, password, whatnot, right? So those are going to be different. We'll have to come up with some kind of standardization there, or at least say that this is the way. So we need a handshake, basically.
A proposal I have for that is the model that we use for a variety of images in Test Infra, the link to which I'm dropping in chat here. And then the thing that actually does the building is here. And then there are a series of jobs. So the TLDR is we use Google Cloud Build. And every image inside of that directory has a variants file that describes how, if we need to build like multiple images, most notably for Kukins, where we need to build like a different image for each branch of Kubernetes, how to do that. And then we have a bunch of post-submit jobs configured so that anytime one of these image directories changes, a post-submit job gets sent off to Cloud Build, and then the things get pushed magically. And then we have something else that goes and scans for the latest images and all the registries, and then bumps the tags in all of our like job files or deployment manifests or what have you. So it is relatively automated. It does not today support the cross-architecture needs of test images in Kubernetes, but we're looking at that. Windows is especially complicated, but the crazy scripts are also a little wild. So yeah, I'm not clear whether or not manifests are supported here, but the person to talk to about this would be Catherine Berry. So this is an example of like, so the tool lives inside of this repo and the images also live inside of this repo, but it can be used in external repos as well. So I think the Slack Infra repo in Kubernetes 6 also has an image directory in there that this tool builds. And I think if you go, searching for Slack Infra jobs, you'll probably find how you can have an image directory specified in a repo and have a job configured to send that off to Cloud Build and have it published. So it doesn't necessarily solve the problem of credentials, but that's like the prior art that we have today.
So the one concern I would have with that is that the Google Cloud Build stuff is kind of a black box to the greater community. And I worry about introducing some like that, especially since part of our jumping on board with the staging buckets and the image promotion process was to be able to have a community-owned kind of release pipeline for these artifacts.
I super hear you. I think Christoph sort of explained why going an approach like mounting the Docker socket is a little scary. And just for what it's worth, a number of these image builds are like, here's a Docker file, Docker build, or here's a make file, run make. And so there's not a whole lot of magic going on. Like what I can run locally, generally speaking, matches what runs in Google Cloud Build. But I hear your concern, and I am open to solutions that sort of alleviate our security concerns. So maybe like one of those non-root image building solutions is a thing worth checking out. Tim and.
Just to be clear, I don't think we should shy away from using a service to get work done if it makes sense, but we should make sure the bar is held really high for transparency and accessibility. I've never used Cloud Build firsthand, so I can't say for sure if it gives us enough of that. But if it does, we should not move away from it just because it's a managed service. I don't know that we should turn Prow into a full CI/CD system. That seems like an endless stream of requests forever and ever that really aren't our purpose. They're not our mission. That said, it needs to be community owned. That is the bar.
Christoph.
So actually thinking about this, there's one use case I'd like to explore, and I don't want to be held to this as like the solution, but something that may be worth exploring is GitHub Actions. Because GitHub Actions both has in-repo secret management. So like if you have admin access to the repo, you can add a secret. You can't ever pull it out, but you can add it in. And in GitHub Actions, it's like an isolated VM. So for the purpose of like building artifact, upload artifact to our staging bucket, it could work very well.
So I think that would definitely fit our needs. We would still need a way to request kind of service credentials with access to the staging bucket to be able to enable that from our end, because again, I wouldn't want to put my personal credentials into GitHub.
Right, so if we did something like, if we had a flow of, we set up a service account for it, like we being the infra team, like if we have a process of like set up service account, install credentials in your repo, and then you just go and like, and even you don't see what the credentials are. It's just like you do a GitHub action, that GitHub action consumes a secret and uploads the thing.
I love it.
Okay.
My only caveat there is I feel like I've heard reports of GitHub Actions hanging or not working as expected, and it's not clear to me what the level of transparency is for people who are not the GitHub admin team to troubleshoot this, because the GitHub admin team highly oversubscribed.
And my thought on that is the same as it was before. We should not shy away from hosted services if they serve our purpose and meet the bar, and GitHub Actions is subject to the same criteria that anything else would be. So if it has the transparency and the integration that we want, then let's explore it.
And that's our hour. So I agree with Dims. I feel like there needs to be sort of a follow-up. I think what would be helpful to drive discussion next time would be sort of a proposal with some of the like options, pros and cons, goals, non-goals, and let's see where that takes us. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Thank you all for your time.
Bye-bye.